A janitor mopping floors after midnight whispered one word that saved a billionaire's life. He never knew she was a CEO. He didn't know that stopping armed kidnappers outside a corporate tower would transform everything he believed about survival, sacrifice, and second chances. Tonight, I'm sharing the story of Cole Palmer, a single dad working the graveyard shift just to keep his son fed, who became an unlikely hero when he witnessed something terrifying unfold in a parking garage. What he whispered in that split second of terror would freeze hardened criminals in their tracks and change two lives forever. Stay with me until the end, and comment below with your city, so I can see how far this story travels around the world. Because what happened next proves that sometimes the most ordinary people create the most extraordinary moments, and that one act of courage can unlock a future you never dared to imagine. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The November wind cut through downtown Ashford like a blade, rattling the windows of the Sterling Heights Tower and sending newspapers tumbling down deserted streets. At 11:47 p.m., the financial district was a ghost town of locked doors and darkened offices. The kind of emptiness that made every sound echo twice as loud. Cole Palmer pushed his cleaning cart through the marble lobby of Sterling Heights, his reflection ghosting across polished floors that gleamed under fluorescent lights. His navy blue janitor's uniform hung loose on his frame, the name patch slightly crooked, the fabric worn thin at the elbows from 2 years of nightly wear. At 36 years old, he'd learned that comfort came second to durability when you were buying work clothes on a budget that barely stretched from paycheck to paycheck. He moved with the efficient rhythm of someone who'd perfected their routine through countless repetitions. Trash bins emptied, floors mopped, bathrooms cleaned, break room restocked. The work was invisible. Nobody noticed when it was done right, but everyone complained when it wasn't. Cole didn't mind the anonymity. Being invisible meant being left alone, and being left alone meant he could think about Owen. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and Cole carefully set down his mop before pulling it out. A text from Mrs. Harrison, his downstairs neighbor who watched Owen during his night shifts. The attached photo made his chest tighten with that familiar mixture of love and longing. His 8-year-old son was sprawled across her couch, fast asleep with a math workbook still open on his lap, his glasses slightly askew on his face. Owen had insisted on finishing his homework before bed, even though Cole had told him it could wait until morning. That was his boy, stubborn and determined, traits he'd inherited from both parents before his mother decided that motherhood wasn't the adventure she'd signed up for. Before Jessica walked out 3 years ago with nothing but a suitcase and a forwarding address she never actually used, Cole typed back a quick thank you to Mrs. Harrison, added a heart emoji that felt inadequate for the gratitude he felt, and tucked the phone away. 4 more hours. 4 more hours of mopping and scrubbing and taking out trash, and then he could go home to his tiny 2-bedroom apartment in the Brookside neighborhood, catch 3 hours of sleep, wake Owen up for school, and head to his day job at the warehouse. The math was brutal, but simple. His warehouse shift ran from 7 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon, 5 days a week, bringing in just enough to cover rent and utilities. His janitorial work at Sterling Heights ran from 10 at night until 6 in the morning, 4 nights a week, covering food, Owen's school expenses, and the endless pile of small costs that came with raising a son alone. Together, the 2 jobs gave him about 4 to 5 hours of sleep on good nights. Less when Owen was sick, or had a school project, or just needed his dad to be present instead of exhausted. But Cole never complained. Not out loud, anyway. Complaining changed nothing. Hard work did. Showing up did. Being the kind of father Owen deserved did, even when it meant running on fumes and instant coffee, even when his body ached from lifting boxes all day and mopping floors all night, even when he caught himself falling asleep standing up in the warehouse bathroom. He'd promised himself after Jessica left that Owen would never feel abandoned again, that his son would know, beyond any doubt, that his father would move heaven and earth to provide for him. So far, Cole had managed to keep that promise. Though some months it came down to choosing between buying himself new work boots or making sure Owen had the sneakers he needed for gym class. Owen always won those calculations. Owen always would. Cole moved through the 20th floor, methodically cleaning each office. Sterling Heights Tower housed dozens of companies, from tech startups on the lower floors to established financial firms near the top. The executive suites on the 40th floor belonged to Quantum Industries, some kind of tech conglomerate that Cole knew nothing about except that their CEO had terrible aim with coffee cups, and their marketing team left sticky notes everywhere. The building was quiet tonight, unusually so. Normally, there were a few workaholics burning midnight oil, their office lights visible as Cole made his rounds. But tonight, the upper floors were dark and still. Even the security desk in the lobby had been unmanned when Cole arrived, which was odd but not unheard of. Jenkins, the regular night guard, sometimes took extended bathroom breaks or stepped outside for a cigarette. Cole finished the 20th floor and moved to the stairwell, preferring the exercise to the elevator. His cart rattled slightly as he guided it down the steps, the sound bouncing off concrete walls. He paused on the landing between floors 19 and 18, looking out through the narrow window at the city below. Ashford spread out in a grid of lights and shadows, the downtown core giving way to residential neighborhoods and industrial zones. Somewhere out there, in a modest apartment building, with paint peeling off the exterior walls, Owen was sleeping peacefully, probably dreaming about the science fair project they'd been working on together. A model volcano that actually erupted, something that had required 3 trips to the craft store and countless YouTube tutorials. The memory made Cole smile. Those moments, the ones where he got to be just a dad, instead of a worker grinding through another shift, were what made everything else bearable. The exhaustion, the financial stress, the loneliness that crept in during quiet moments like this. All of it was worth it for Owen's excitement when the volcano finally worked, for his son's arms around his neck at bedtime, for the sound of, "I love you, Dad," delivered with complete sincerity. Cole continued down the stairs, his mind already planning tomorrow. He needed to stop by the grocery store after his warehouse shift, pick up ingredients for Owen's favorite pasta dish. His son had been asking for it all week, and Cole had been putting it off because the good Parmesan cheese was expensive. But tomorrow was Friday, payday, and he could splurge a little. Owen deserved that much. The 18th floor was dark and empty, as expected. Cole went through his routine efficiently, his hands moving on autopilot while his thoughts drifted. He thought about Owen's upcoming birthday, about the bike his son had been eyeing at the second-hand shop downtown. If Cole picked up some extra shifts, cut back on his own expenses, maybe skipped a few meals, he could afford it. The smile on Owen's face would be worth every sacrifice. By the time Cole reached the ground floor again, it was nearly 1 in the morning. His feet ached in boots that had seen better days, and his lower back had that familiar throb that came from hours of bending and lifting, but he was making progress. Another 3 floors to go, then the parking garage levels, and his shift would be done. He pushed his cart toward the service elevator that led to the underground parking levels. The one area of Sterling Heights that always made him slightly uncomfortable. Something about the concrete pillars casting long shadows, the way sound traveled strangely in the cavernous space, the isolation of being several stories below street level with nobody around. But discomfort didn't pay the bills. Cole hit the button for sub-level 2 and leaned against his cart as the elevator descended, the mechanical hum filling the small space. When the doors opened, cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of motor oil and concrete dust. The parking garage stretched out before him, dimly lit by overhead fluorescents that buzzed and flickered. Most of the spaces were empty at this hour, just a scattered collection of vehicles belonging to the few people who'd worked late and hadn't retrieved their cars yet. Cole's footsteps echoed as he pushed his cart forward, heading for the trash collection area in the far corner. That's when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong. Voices, low and urgent, coming from somewhere near the garage entrance ramp. Cole froze, his janitor's instinct telling him to stay quiet and invisible. Probably just people having a late-night conversation, nothing to worry about. But something in the tone made his skin prickle. These weren't friendly voices. These were voices tight with tension and barely controlled aggression. And underneath them, another sound. Someone crying, the kind of quiet, desperate sobbing that came from pure terror. Cole abandoned his cart and moved toward the source of the sounds, keeping close to the concrete pillars, his heart beginning to hammer against his ribs. Every rational part of his brain screamed at him to turn around, to mind his own business, to think about Owen waiting at home. But his feet kept moving forward, drawn by that sound of fear, by the knowledge that someone needed help, and he was the only one there to provide it. What he saw when he peered around the pillar made his blood run cold. 3 hours earlier, before Cole Palmer's shift began, and before the night turned into a nightmare, he'd been standing in the cramped kitchen of his Brookside apartment, helping Owen with fractions while simultaneously trying to assemble something resembling dinner from the meager contents of their refrigerator. Owen sat at their small dining table, a piece of furniture salvaged from a curb 3 years ago that wobbled unless you put a folded napkin under one leg. His math workbook lay open, filled with problems about dividing pizzas and sharing cookies, word problems that assumed a level of abundance Cole could barely remember. "Dad, I don't get it," Owen said, his voice carrying that particular frustration of an 8-year-old confronting something that seemed deliberately confusing. "If you have 3/4 of a pizza and you eat 1/4, why isn't the answer 2/4? Why do we have to make it 1/2? Cole looked up from the pasta he was boiling, the cheap store brand kind that cost 99 cents a box. "Because 1/2 and 2/4 are the same thing, buddy. We're just simplifying it, making it smaller and easier to understand." "But it's not easier, it's more confusing." Cole couldn't argue with that logic. He moved to the table, sitting down beside his son, and grabbed a piece of paper. "Okay, look at it this way. Imagine you have 2/4. That's the same as having $1/2, right? Same value, just different ways of saying it." Owen's face scrunched up in concentration, a habit that made him look exactly like Cole had at that age. According to photos his mother still kept somewhere. After a moment, understanding dawned. "Oh, so it's like saying the same thing but shorter?" "Exactly. Like saying TV instead of television. Same thing, just simplified." "Math is weird, Dad." "Yeah, buddy, it really is." They worked through 3 more problems before Cole had to return to the stove to prevent the pasta from boiling over. The kitchen was barely large enough for 1 person, let alone 2, with counters that had been installed sometime in the previous century, and appliances that ran on hope and prayer. The refrigerator made a rattling sound that Cole had learned to ignore. And the oven temperature was always about 20 degrees off from what the dial said. But it was theirs, this tiny apartment with its quirks and flaws, and Cole had made it as warm and safe as he could manage on a shoestring budget. The walls were covered with Owen's artwork, drawings of dinosaurs and spaceships, and the 2 of them as stick figures holding hands. A small bookshelf Cole had built from spare lumber held Owen's growing collection of library books, meticulously cared for because late fees were not in the budget. The living room doubled as Cole's bedroom, his mattress folded against the wall during the day to create space for Owen to play. Owen had the actual bedroom, a space Cole had painted a cheerful blue and filled with second-hand furniture that he'd carefully repaired and refinished. His son's happiness, his sense of security, mattered more than Cole's own comfort. It always would. Dinner was simple, pasta with butter, and the last bit of Parmesan cheese, some frozen vegetables that had been on sale, and toast made from bread that was 1 day from expiring, but still perfectly good. They ate together at the wobbly table, Owen chattering about his day at Brookside Elementary, about the book his teacher had read aloud, about his friend Tyler getting in trouble for talking during quiet time. Cole listened with the full attention his son deserved, asking questions, laughing at the funny parts, offering sympathy when Owen described how Tyler had to miss recess. These dinners were precious, stolen moments between shifts when Cole got to be fully present as a father instead of a half-asleep zombie counting down minutes until his next job. After dinner, Owen insisted on helping with dishes, standing on a step stool to reach the sink. Cole washed while Owen dried, and they talked about the upcoming weekend, about maybe going to the park if the weather held, about the possibility of renting a movie if Cole could spare the $3. "Dad," Owen said as he carefully dried a plate, his small hands moving with exaggerated care. "Tommy at school said his dad is taking him to Adventure Zone for his birthday. Can we go sometime?" Adventure Zone was an indoor amusement park on the other side of Ashford, the kind of place with arcade games and go-karts and pizza that cost twice what it was worth. The kind of place Cole could never afford on his salary, not without skipping rent or utilities or food. "Maybe someday, buddy," Cole said, the words tasting like failure. "We'll see." Owen nodded, and the way he accepted that non-answer without argument broke something in Cole's chest. His son had learned too young not to ask for things, not to expect treats or extras, to be grateful for what they had. It was a maturity born from necessity, and Cole hated that Owen had to carry it. At 7:30, Mrs. Harrison knocked on the door, right on schedule. She was a widow in her late 60s who lived in the apartment below theirs. A woman with gray hair always pulled back in a neat bun and eyes that crinkled with genuine warmth. She'd been watching Owen during Cole's night shifts since they moved into the building, refusing to accept more than token payment, insisting that Owen was a joy and that she'd be lonely without the company. "Ready for another evening of beating me at checkers?" she asked Owen, who grinned and grabbed the game from the shelf. Cole handed her the emergency contact information he always left, even though she had it memorized, along with $20 for pizza if Owen got hungry later. "I should be back around 6:30 tomorrow morning. If anything comes up, anything at all, you call me immediately." "Cole, we'll be fine. Go. Make sure those fancy office people have clean floors to walk on." He kissed the top of Owen's head, reminded him to brush his teeth and listen to Mrs. Harrison, and grabbed his work jacket. The night air was cold when he stepped outside, and his car, a 15-year-old sedan held together with duct tape and determination, took 3 tries to start. The drive to Sterling Heights Tower took 25 minutes through empty streets, past neighborhoods that ranged from struggling to thriving. Cole's warehouse job was in an industrial zone on the south side of Ashford, surrounded by factories and distribution centers. But his janitorial work was in the heart of downtown, where glass towers reached toward the sky and people wore suits that cost more than Cole made in a month. 2 different worlds, and Cole existed in the space between them, invisible to the executives who walked past him without a glance, essential to the functioning of their perfect corporate environments, but never acknowledged as more than part of the furniture. He parked in the employee lot behind Sterling Heights, changed into his uniform in the dingy locker room, and clocked in at exactly 10 p.m. The building supervisor, a bored man named Patterson who Cole suspected was half asleep most nights, barely grunted in acknowledgement. "Floors 20 through ground, then all 3 parking level," Patterson said, the same instructions he gave every shift. "Jenkins called in sick, so security desk is unmanned tonight. Just you and the building." Just him and the building. Cole had worked alone before, but something about tonight felt different. Maybe it was the way the wind howled between the towers outside, or the unusual absence of late working employees, or just his own exhaustion, playing tricks on his perception. He collected his supplies, loaded his cart, and took the service elevator to the 20th floor to begin his routine. Floor by floor, office by office, trash bin by trash bin, his mind wandered as his hands worked, drifting between worry about Owen's upcoming dentist appointment they couldn't really afford, and calculations about whether he could pick up an extra shift at the warehouse next week. The hours blurred together in a haze of repetitive motion. Mop, rinse, repeat, empty, replace, move on. Cole's feet ached, his back protested, his eyes burned with fatigue, but he pushed through it the way he always did, fueled by the mental image of Owen sleeping peacefully, counting on his father to provide. Around midnight, Cole took a brief break in the 20th floor break room, sitting in a chair designed for executives and eating the peanut butter sandwich he'd packed. The view from this height was spectacular, the city spreading out in all directions, lights twinkling like earthbound stars. From up here, Ashford looked beautiful and full of possibility. From ground level, where Cole actually lived, it looked very different. Harder. Less forgiving. A place where one unexpected expense could send you spiraling, where opportunities were reserved for people who'd been born into the right circumstances, where hard work didn't always translate to success, no matter what the inspirational posters claimed. But Cole kept working anyway, kept pushing, kept hoping that someday his luck would change, that somehow, through sheer determination and sacrifice, he'd build something better for Owen. A future where his son didn't have to learn fractions at a wobbly table, or accept, maybe someday, as the answer to simple requests. He finished his sandwich, tossed the wrapper, and returned to his cart. 3 more hours until his shift ended. 3 more hours, and then he could go home to Owen. Cole had no way of knowing that he'd never finish his shift that night, that in less than an hour, everything about his carefully constructed life would shatter and reassemble into something he couldn't have imagined in his wildest dreams. The parking garage on sublevel 2 of Sterling Heights Tower stretched out like a concrete cathedral, all harsh angles and shadows broken only by the sickly yellow glow of fluorescent lights that hummed with electrical current. Cole Palmer stood frozen behind a support pillar, his heart hammering so hard he could hear the blood rushing in his ears. 30 feet away, near the garage entrance ramp, 3 figures in dark clothing surrounded a woman pressed against the side of a luxury sedan. Even from this distance, even in the poor lighting, Cole could see the gun. The man holding it kept the weapon low but visible, a casual threat that didn't need to be emphasized because everyone present understood the power dynamic. The woman was maybe in her mid-30s, wearing what had probably been an immaculate business suit before tonight. Her dark hair had come loose from whatever style she'd worn it in, and her hands were raised in a gesture of surrender that made Cole's stomach twist. She was trying to speak, her voice carrying across the garage in fragments. "Please, I can give you money. Whatever you want. Just don't." "Shut up," one of the kidnappers snapped. His voice was flat, professional, devoid of emotion. This wasn't some desperate robbery. This was planned. "We're not here for your wallet, Miss Chambers. We're here for you." Miss Chambers. The name triggered something in Cole's memory. Lilia Chambers. He'd seen that name on the directory in the Sterling Heights lobby, listed as CEO of Quantum Industries, the tech conglomerate that occupied the entire 40th floor. One of those titans of industry, whose company probably employed thousands of people, whose decisions affected markets and economies, whose world existed so far above Cole's that they might as well be different species. And now she was about to be kidnapped, possibly killed, and Cole was the only person who knew it was happening. His mind raced through options with the speed of pure panic. He could run back to the elevator, get to street level, find a phone and call the police. But that would take time, and the kidnappers were already moving, one of them opening the rear door of a black van parked nearby, another grabbing Lilia's arm with brutal efficiency. He could hide, pretend he never saw anything, protect himself, and by extension protect Owen, who needed his father alive and employed, not dead or injured playing hero. Every rational part of his brain screamed for this option, begged him to think about his son, to remember that Owen had already lost one parent and couldn't afford to lose another. But then, Lilia Chambers made a sound, a whimper of pure terror that cut through every rational argument Cole could construct. It was the sound of someone who knew, absolutely knew, that they were about to die or disappear or suffer something worse. The sound of someone who'd run out of options and hope. Cole thought about Owen, about what kind of man he wanted his son to become, about the lessons you taught, not through words but through actions, through the choices you made when everything was on the line. He thought about his own father, gone these past 10 years, who'd always said that your character was defined by what you did when nobody was watching. Well, nobody was watching now. Just Cole, a janitor who nobody would miss if he disappeared, whose testimony about what he'd witnessed would probably be dismissed or ignored, whose entire existence was defined by invisibility. But invisibility could be an advantage. Cole's hands were shaking as he looked around the garage, searching for anything that could help. His cleaning cart sat abandoned near the elevator, mop and supplies visible, useless as weapons but potentially useful as distractions. His phone was in a pocket, but calling for help would take too long and the sound might give away his position. The kidnappers were focused entirely on Lilia, manhandling her toward the van despite her attempts to resist. She was fighting now, her earlier compliance giving way to desperate struggle, but she was one person against 3 trained professionals. The physics of the situation were brutally unfair. Cole made his decision in the space between heartbeats. He grabbed a spray bottle of industrial cleaner from his cart, the heavy-duty kind that came with warnings about eye damage and skin irritation. It wasn't much, but it was something. Then he moved, keeping low and quiet, using the parked cars as cover, closing the distance between himself and the kidnappers with a speed driven by adrenaline and terror. He was maybe 15 feet away when one of them noticed him. The man without the gun, the one who'd been serving as muscle, spotted Cole's movement and alerted the others with a sharp word Cole didn't catch. The man with the gun turned, bringing the weapon up, and Cole saw his own death in that motion. He was going to die in a parking garage for a woman he'd never met, and Owen was going to wake up tomorrow to find out his father had been killed. And Mrs. Harrison would have to explain to an 8-year-old that sometimes good people made stupid choices and paid the ultimate price. But Cole didn't stop moving. He raised the spray bottle like it was actually a viable weapon, his finger on the trigger, his brain working at light speed to process the angles and distances and timing. The gunman's face twisted with something between confusion and contempt. "Are you kidding me? A janitor with a spray bottle? Let her go." Cole heard himself say, his voice steadier than he felt. "This is a bad idea. This whole building has cameras. You're being recorded right now." It was a lie. Cole knew the parking garage cameras had been broken for weeks. The building management too cheap to fix them promptly. But the kidnappers didn't know that, and doubt flickered across their faces. The one holding Lilia tightened his grip. "He's bluffing. Cameras have been dead for a month. We checked. So much for that strategy." Cole adjusted his approach, taking another step forward despite every survival instinct screaming at him to run. He was close enough now to see details. The gun was a semi-automatic, professionally maintained. The van had out-of-state plates. These weren't amateurs or opportunistic criminals. This was organized, well-planned, and Cole had just inserted himself into the middle of something far more dangerous than he'd initially understood. Lilia's eyes found his, wide with terror and something else. Confusion, maybe, or disbelief that a janitor was trying to rescue her. Her mascara had run in dark streaks down her face, and there was a cut on her lip where someone had hit her. The sight triggered something primal in Cole, a rage he hadn't known he was capable of feeling. "Last chance," the gunman said, and he wasn't talking to Lilia anymore. He was talking to Cole, giving him one final opportunity to walk away. "Turn around, go back to mopping floors, and forget you saw anything. Otherwise, you're coming with us too, and I promise you won't enjoy the trip." Cole's finger tightened on the spray bottle trigger. His legs felt like water. His vision had narrowed to a tunnel focused on that gun, on the man holding it, on the split second between life and death. "I can't do that," Cole said quietly. The gunman's expression hardened. "Then you're a dead man." Time slowed in that way it does when everything crystallizes into absolute clarity. Cole saw the gunman's finger beginning to squeeze the trigger, saw the muscle contracting, saw the mechanical process that would send a bullet through his chest and end everything. He saw Owen's face in his mind, heard his son's voice saying, "I love you, Dad," with that complete trust that said nothing bad could happen as long as his father was there. He saw his own father, dead too young, who'd taught him that doing right mattered more than doing easy. And in that frozen moment of impossible clarity, Cole Palmer whispered one word, a word he'd learned years ago from a self-defense class he'd taken after Jessica left, when he'd been paranoid about protecting Owen from every possible danger. A word that was specifically chosen for its psychological impact, for the way it disrupted an attacker's focus and created a split second of confusion. Cole looked directly at the gunman and whispered, "Freeze." The effect was instantaneous and completely unexpected, not because the kidnappers actually froze, but because of what happened in the microsecond after Cole spoke. The command, delivered in a tone that carried absolute authority despite coming from a janitor in a torn uniform, triggered a hardwired response in the gunman's brain. Military training, police training, any kind of tactical instruction drilled certain words into automatic reactions. Freeze. Stop. Drop. Gun. These were words that bypassed conscious thought and triggered muscle memory. The gunman hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, just long enough for his brain to process the disconnect between the authority in Cole's voice and the obvious lack of authority in his position. And in that fraction of a second, Cole moved. He squeezed the trigger on his spray bottle, sending a stream of industrial cleaner directly into the gunman's eyes. The man screamed, a sound of pure pain and rage, and his finger jerked on the trigger reflexively. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space, echoing off concrete walls like thunder. Cole felt something hot graze his shoulder, felt the impact spin him sideways, but adrenaline kept him moving. He collided with the gunman, both of them going down hard on the concrete. The gun skittered away across the ground, and suddenly everyone was moving at once. The second kidnapper lunged for the weapon. The third one still held Lilia, but she was fighting with renewed desperation, her elbow connecting with his ribs. Cole grappled with the gunman, who was still partially blinded but fighting back with vicious efficiency. A fist caught Cole in the jaw, snapping his head back. Another blow landed on his ribs, driving the air from his lungs. The gunman was younger, stronger, trained in ways Cole wasn't. This was a fight Cole couldn't win through skill, only through sheer desperate determination. They rolled across the concrete, Cole trying to keep the man away from the gun, trying to buy time for Lilia to escape, trying to do anything that might prevent this from ending with both of them dead. He grabbed the man's shirt, then his arm, then whatever he could reach, just holding on, just making it difficult, just being an obstacle that refused to quit. "Run!" Cole shouted toward Lilia, though his voice came out as more of a rasp. "Get out, run." But where? The elevator was too far. The stairwell entrance was on the other side of the garage, and the second kidnapper had retrieved the gun and was turning back toward them with murder in his eyes. This was it, Cole thought. This was how it ended. Not heroically, not successfully, just messily and pointlessly in a parking garage that wouldn't even be clean for tomorrow morning's executives. Owen's face filled his mind again, and Cole felt tears mixing with blood and sweat on his face. "I'm sorry, buddy. I tried. I'm so sorry." Then everything exploded into sirens and lights. The police cruisers came screaming down the entrance ramp with lights blazing red and blue across concrete walls, transforming the parking garage into a strobing nightmare of color and sound. 3 vehicles, then 4. Officers pouring out with weapons drawn and voices shouting commands that overlapped into an incomprehensible wall of noise. Cole didn't understand how they'd arrived so fast, didn't have the mental capacity to question it while he was still grappling with the gunman on the ground. His shoulder burned where the bullet had grazed him. His ribs ached from the punches he'd taken, and his entire body was operating on nothing but adrenaline and the desperate need to keep fighting until help arrived. And now, help was here. The kidnapper beneath him suddenly went limp, hands raising in surrender. As officers surrounded them, Cole felt rough hands pulling him away, rolling him onto his back, someone checking him for injuries while voices barked questions he couldn't process. "Sir, are you hurt? Sir, can you hear me? Stay still, paramedics are on the way." Cole's vision swam, the fluorescent lights above him blurring into halos. His jaw throbbed where he'd been hit, and now that the immediate danger was passing, his body was registering all the damage he'd sustained. The shoulder wound that had felt like nothing during the fight now screamed with every breath. "The woman," Cole managed to gasp out. "Is she okay? Did they get her?" "Ma'am is safe, sir. Just focus on staying calm. You're going to be fine." But Cole needed to see for himself. He turned his head, ignoring the officer's attempts to keep him still, and found Lilia Chambers 20 feet away. She was wrapped in someone's jacket, surrounded by officers, clearly shaken but alive and free. As if sensing his gaze, she looked over, and their eyes met across the chaotic scene. The expression on her face was something Cole would remember for the rest of his life. Shock, certainly, and relief, but underneath it all was something deeper. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. She'd been seconds away from whatever fate the kidnappers had planned, and a janitor with a spray bottle had stepped between her and that darkness. An officer knelt beside Cole, a woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. "Can you tell me your name, sir?" "Cole Palmer. I work here, janitorial staff." "Mr. Palmer, you're being treated for a gunshot wound. The bullet grazed your shoulder, but didn't penetrate. You're incredibly lucky." Lucky. The word felt absurd. Cole had just gambled with his life, with Owen's future, with everything that mattered, and somehow he'd survived. But lucky implied chance. And what Cole felt was something closer to disbelief, that his reckless courage hadn't gotten him killed. Paramedics arrived with a stretcher and equipment, their movements efficient and practiced. They cut away Cole's uniform shirt to access the shoulder wound, and the sight of his own blood made him dizzy. It wasn't life-threatening, they assured him, but he needed to go to the hospital for proper treatment and observation. "I can't," Cole protested weakly. "My son, I need to get home to my son. He's with a neighbor, and she's expecting me at 6:30, and I can't just..." "Mr. Palmer." The police officer's voice was gentle but firm. "You've been shot. You're going to the hospital. Give me your neighbor's contact information, and we'll make sure she knows what happened, and that you're okay." The fight drained out of Cole. He was suddenly aware of how exhausted he was, how much his entire body hurt, how close he'd come to never seeing Owen again. He gave the officer Mrs. Harrison's number and watched as she stepped away to make the call, leaving Cole with the paramedics who were loading him onto the stretcher. As they wheeled him toward the ambulance, Cole caught fragments of conversation around him. The kidnappers were being arrested, read their rights, searched for weapons and identification. Lilia Chambers was giving a statement to detectives, her voice steady despite the trauma she'd just endured. Someone mentioned that a security company monitoring the building's exterior cameras had seen suspicious activity and called it in, which explained the miraculously fast police response. The ambulance ride passed in a blur of medical jargon and the sting of antiseptic. Cole stared at the ambulance ceiling, watching the lights pass overhead through the small window, trying to process what he'd just done. He'd attacked armed kidnappers. He'd been shot. He'd potentially saved someone's life but also potentially orphaned his son in the process. What kind of father took those risks? What kind of man gambled everything on a desperate attempt to help a stranger? The kind who couldn't live with himself if he'd walked away, Cole realized. The kind who wanted Owen to grow up knowing that some things mattered more than personal safety. The kind who believed, deep in his core, that you helped people when they needed it, even when the cost was high, even when the cost could have been everything. At Ashford General Hospital, Cole was moved to an examination room where a tired-looking doctor cleaned and dressed his wound. The bullet had carved a shallow groove across his shoulder, painful but not serious. He'd need antibiotics to prevent infection, pain medication to manage discomfort, and rest to heal properly. "You're very fortunate," the doctor said, applying a bandage with practiced efficiency. "A few inches to the left, and this would have been much worse. How's your pain level?" "Manageable," Cole lied. Everything hurt, but complaining seemed pointless. The doctor gave him a look that said she'd heard that particular lie 1,000 times, but let it slide. She prescribed medications Cole probably couldn't afford, and gave instructions about wound care and follow-up appointments, then left him alone in the examination room with his thoughts and a hospital gown that barely closed in the back. Cole pulled out his phone, relieved that it had survived the fight, and found a text from Mrs. Harrison sent 20 minutes ago. The police had called her, explained the situation, and she'd assured them that Owen could stay with her as long as needed. She'd added that Cole was a hero and that she was praying for him, which made his throat tight with emotion. There was also a voicemail from a number he didn't recognize. Cole listened to it, expecting a telemarketer or wrong number, and instead heard a professional male voice identifying himself as Detective Ryan Shaw from the Ashford Police Department. "Mr. Palmer, this is Detective Shaw. I'm investigating tonight's incident at Sterling Heights Tower. We need to get a formal statement from you when you're feeling up to it. I'll be by the hospital tomorrow morning around 9. In the meantime, I want you to know that what you did tonight was extraordinarily brave. You saved Miss Chambers' life. We'll talk more tomorrow." Saved her life. The words should have felt triumphant, but Cole just felt drained. He'd done something impulsive and dangerous, and the only reason it hadn't ended in disaster was luck and the timely arrival of police. A nurse appeared to check his vitals and inform him that he was being held for observation overnight. Standard procedure for gunshot wounds, even minor ones. Cole wanted to argue, wanted to insist on going home to Owen, but his body made the decision for him by nearly passing out. When he tried to stand, he was moved to a hospital room on the 3rd floor, a space that was functional but sterile, with machines that beeped at irregular intervals and a view of the parking lot through a narrow window. A television mounted on the wall played the late-night news on mute, and Cole watched the silent images flicker past without really seeing them, until his own face appeared on the screen. Cole sat up so fast his shoulder screamed in protest. The news was showing footage from outside Sterling Heights Tower, police cars and ambulances visible, yellow crime scene tape cordoning off the area. Then a photo, his employee ID badge picture from the janitorial company, looking exhausted and slightly annoyed at being photographed. The chyron beneath read, "Janitor saves CEO from kidnapping, sustains gunshot wound." Cole grabbed the remote with shaking hands and unmuted the television. Incredible act of bravery in downtown Ashford tonight when Cole Palmer, a 36-year-old janitor and single father, interrupted what police are calling a sophisticated kidnapping attempt. Palmer confronted 3 armed men who were attempting to abduct Lilia Chambers, CEO of Quantum Industries, from the parking garage of Sterling Heights Tower where Palmer works the night shift. The broadcast cut to footage of Lilia Chambers being escorted to a police car, looking shaken but composed, then back to the anchor. Police say Palmer sustained a minor gunshot wound during the confrontation but managed to delay the kidnappers long enough for officers to arrive. All 3 suspects are in custody. Miss Chambers was unharmed. We'll have more on this developing story as information becomes available, but tonight, Ashford has a genuine hero in Cole Palmer, who put his own life on the line to protect a stranger. Cole stared at the television in disbelief. Hero. The word felt too big, too weighted with expectations he couldn't possibly meet. He wasn't a hero. He was a tired janitor who'd made a split-second decision and gotten lucky enough to survive it. His phone started buzzing with notifications. Text messages from numbers he didn't recognize. Friend requests on social media accounts he barely used. Missed calls piling up. The story was already spreading, amplified by the kind of media attention that Cole had spent his entire life avoiding. He turned off the phone and let his head fall back against the pillow, staring at the ceiling tiles and wondering how everything had gotten so complicated so quickly. 12 hours ago, his biggest concern had been whether he could afford to buy Owen that bike for his birthday. Now he was in a hospital bed, his face was on the news, and people were calling him a hero for doing something that had felt more like desperate panic than bravery. A soft knock on the door interrupted his spiraling thoughts. A nurse entered, followed by someone unexpected. Lilia Chambers stood in the doorway of his hospital room, still wearing the remains of her business suit, though someone had given her a police department sweatshirt to replace her torn jacket. Her hair was pulled back in a hasty ponytail, and without makeup, she looked younger and more vulnerable than she had in the parking garage. "Mr. Palmer," she said, her voice hoarse. "I hope I'm not intruding. I asked if I could see you, and they said you were awake." Cole struggled to sit up properly, wincing at the movement. "Miss Chambers, are you okay? Did they hurt you?" I'm fine, thanks to you. She moved closer to the bed, her hands clasped in front of her like she didn't quite know what to do with them. I just wanted to see you, to make sure you were all right, and to say thank you. Though thank you seems completely inadequate for what you did. I just did what anyone would do. No. Her voice was firm. That's not true, and you know it. Most people would have run, or hidden, or called for help and hoped someone else dealt with it. You ran toward 3 armed men with nothing but a spray bottle. You put yourself between me and them. You were shot protecting me. Cole didn't know what to say to that. The exhaustion, the pain medication beginning to kick in, and the sheer surreality of having a billionaire CEO in his hospital room left him speechless. Lilia pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat down, her movements careful, as if she was still processing her own trauma. The police told me you're a single father, that you were working your night shift when this happened, that you have an 8-year-old son waiting for you at home. Owen. Cole said automatically. His name is Owen. You risked leaving Owen without a father to save me. A complete stranger. Lilia's eyes were bright. Lilia's eyes were bright, with unshed tears. I don't have words for what that means, Mr. Palmer. I don't know how to process the kind of courage that takes. Morning arrived with watery sunlight filtering through the hospital room window, and a nurse checking Cole's vitals with brisk efficiency. His shoulder throbbed with a deep ache that the pain medication only partially dulled, and his entire body felt like it had been put through an industrial press. Every movement reminded him of the previous night's violence, muscles screaming their protest at the abuse they'd endured. Detective Shaw arrived at 9 o'clock sharp, exactly as promised. He was a man in his mid-40s with graying temples and the kind of steady gaze that suggested he'd seen everything humanity had to offer and was no longer surprised by any of it. He pulled a chair close to Cole's bed and set a digital recorder on the bedside table. Mr. Palmer, I need to get your official statement about what happened last night. Take your time. Tell me everything you remember, starting from when you first became aware of the situation. Cole recounted the events as clearly as his foggy brain would allow. Finding the kidnappers in the parking garage, the decision to intervene, the spray bottle and the single word he'd whispered, the fight and the gunshot and the arrival of the police. Detective Shaw listened without interruption, occasionally making notes but mostly just absorbing the information. This word you whispered, the detective said when Cole finished. Freeze. Can you explain why you chose that particular word? Cole felt his face heat with embarrassment. I took a self-defense class a few years back. After my ex-wife left, I was paranoid about protecting Owen from everything. The instructor said that certain command words, delivered with authority, could create a moment of hesitation in an attacker. It disrupts their mental process for just a second. I didn't think it would actually work, honestly. I was just trying anything I could think of. Detective Shaw nodded slowly. Well, it worked. The gunman, his name is Victor Brennan, former military with tactical training. He's already lawyered up, but the other two are talking. They confirmed that your command created confusion, that split second where Brennan's training kicked in automatically. That's when you used the spray bottle and everything went sideways for them. Are they saying who hired them? We're still piecing that together, but it looks like corporate espionage combined with a ransom scheme. Miss Chambers has competitors who would benefit from her removal, and she's worth enough that a ransom would be substantial. These weren't street criminals, Mr. Palmer. These were professionals, and you took them on with cleaning supplies and sheer guts. The detective's tone carried a mixture of admiration and disbelief that made Cole uncomfortable. He didn't feel brave. He felt like someone who'd made a reckless choice and gotten incredibly lucky. After Detective Shaw left, promising to keep Cole updated on the investigation, a hospital social worker appeared to discuss his discharge. He'd be released this afternoon with prescriptions and instructions to follow up with his regular doctor in a week. The problem was that Cole didn't have a regular doctor. He had an emergency room he went to when things were dire. and a pharmacy where he filled prescriptions for Owen but rarely for himself. The social worker seemed to sense this without Cole saying anything explicit. She provided him with information about community health clinics and programs that offered reduced-cost medical care, her professionalism masking what was probably pity. Cole accepted the pamphlets with as much dignity as he could muster, adding them to the growing pile of problems he'd need to solve. His phone, which he'd reluctantly turned back on, was chaos. Hundreds of notifications, messages from reporters, requesting interviews, social media mentions that numbered in the thousands. Someone had created a hashtag Janitor Hero, that was apparently trending locally. The attention made Cole's skin crawl. He scrolled through until he found Mrs. Harrison's messages. She'd kept him updated throughout the night, assuring him that Owen was fine, that she'd explained to him that his father had helped someone and gotten a small injury, but was okay. She'd taken Owen to school that morning, packed his lunch, and promised to pick him up in the afternoon. The latest message said that reporters had shown up at their apartment building looking for Cole, and building security had turned them away. Reporters. At his home, where Owen lived. Cole's hands tightened on the phone, anger cutting through the pain medication haze. He'd done a good thing, saved someone's life, and now his privacy was being invaded. His son potentially exposed to media attention that an 8-year-old shouldn't have to deal with. Another knock on the door. Cole looked up, expecting another nurse or detective, and instead found Lilia Chambers for the second time in 12 hours. She looked better than she had last night, her hair professionally styled, wearing fresh clothes and minimal makeup that didn't quite hide the exhaustion in her eyes. "Mr. Palmer," she said, "I hope you don't mind another visit. I wanted to check on you before you're discharged." "Miss Chambers." Cole tried to sit up straighter, acutely aware that he was wearing a hospital gown and probably looked like death warmed over. "You didn't need to come back. I'm fine, really. Please, call me Lilia." She moved into the room, and Cole noticed a man in a dark suit standing just outside the door. Security, obviously. "And I did need to come back. I've been thinking about our conversation last night, about what you risked, and I've been doing some research." Something about her tone made Cole nervous. "What kind of research?" Lilia pulled out a tablet from her bag and pulled up what looked like a background report. "I hope you'll forgive the intrusion, but I needed to understand who you are. Cole Palmer, 36 years old, single father to Owen Palmer, age 8. You work 2 jobs, one at a warehouse during the day and janitorial work at Sterling Heights at night. You're 3 months behind on your truck payments, 2 months behind on medical bills from when Owen had pneumonia last winter, and you're barely making rent each month despite working nearly 80 hours a week." Cole's face burned with humiliation. Having his financial struggles laid out so clinically by someone whose net worth probably exceeded the GDP of small countries was degrading in a way that made him wish he'd stayed hidden in the parking garage. "I don't need your pity," he said, his voice harder than he'd intended. "I'm doing fine. Owen and I are fine. I'm not offering pity, Mr. Palmer. I'm offering gratitude and an opportunity." Lilia set the tablet aside and looked at him directly. "You saved my life. That's not hyperbole or exaggeration. If you hadn't intervened, I'd be dead or worse right now. That creates a debt I can never truly repay, but I'd like to try. You don't owe me anything. I did what anyone should do, but most people don't do it." Her voice was gentle but insistent. "Most people make the safe choice, the smart choice, the choice that protects themselves first. You made a different choice, and I want to honor that." Cole felt like the conversation was spiraling in a direction he couldn't control. "What are you asking?" "I'm not asking anything. I'm offering." Lilia leaned forward. "Quantum Industries has a corporate security division. We employ over 200 people in various security roles, from basic facility protection to executive protection to cybersecurity. I want to offer you a position as head of our community safety initiatives." Cole blinked, certain he'd misheard. "What? It's a new program I've been developing, partnerships with local communities to improve safety and security, funding for neighborhood watch programs, training for citizens who want to help protect their communities, partnerships with police departments. I need someone to run it who actually understands what it means to protect people, who doesn't do it for a paycheck but because it's right. Miss Chambers, Lilia, I'm a janitor. I don't have experience managing anything, let alone a corporate program. You have experience doing what's right when it costs you everything. That's more valuable than any management degree. She pulled out a folder and set it on the bed. This is a formal offer. The salary is $90,000 a year, plus full benefits, health insurance for you and Owen, paid vacation, everything you need to actually have a life, instead of just surviving. $90,000, the number hit Cole like a physical blow. That was more than he made at both jobs combined. That was a salary that could pay off his debts, get Owen into better schools, afford the bike and the trips to Adventure Zone, and all the small things Cole had been denying his son. Why? The word came out as barely a whisper. Why would you do this? Because you reminded me what real courage looks like, Lilia said simply. And because I've spent years building a company focused on innovation and profit, and I've forgotten what actually matters. You helped me remember. Let me help you in return. Cole was discharged from Ashford General Hospital at 2 in the afternoon, his shoulder bandaged and throbbing, his mind reeling from Lilia Chambers' job offer. The folder containing the formal employment contract sat in his lap like a live grenade as he rode in the taxi back to his apartment, paid for by Quantum Industries despite his protests. The job offer was absurd. It was generous to the point of being suspicious. It was everything Cole needed and nothing he'd earned through traditional qualifications. And yet, as he read through the contract during the taxi ride, everything appeared legitimate. $90,000 annual salary, comprehensive health benefits, 3 weeks paid vacation, retirement contributions, even relocation assistance if needed. At the bottom of the contract was a handwritten note in elegant script. You saved my life, Cole. Let me try to improve yours. No strings attached, no expectations beyond doing the kind of good work I know you're capable of. Think about it. Take all the time you need. The offer stands regardless. Lilia. The taxi pulled up to his apartment building in Brookside, a 3-story structure that had seen better decades. Paint peeled from the exterior walls. One of the security lights was permanently broken, and the playground equipment in the small courtyard had been deemed unsafe and removed months ago without replacement. This was home, the best Cole could afford on his current salary, and it was nothing like the world Lilia Chambers inhabited. Mrs. Harrison met him in the hallway outside his apartment, her face creased with worry and relief. Cole, thank goodness. Let me look at you. Are you really all right? The news said you were shot. Just a graze, Mrs. Harrison. I'm fine, really. He winced as she hugged him, his shoulder protesting the contact. Where's Owen? Is he okay? He's inside with my daughter. She came over to help keep him distracted. He knows you were hurt helping someone, but we didn't give him details about guns or kidnappers. He's been worried, though. Kept asking when you'd be home. Guilt twisted in Cole's stomach. He'd put Owen through unnecessary worry, had risked making his son an orphan, all for a stranger. The weight of that decision felt heavier now than it had in the moment. Mrs. Harrison must have seen something in his face because her expression softened. You did a good thing, Cole. A brave thing. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Owen burst out of Mrs. Harrison's apartment before Cole could respond, his small face lighting up with relief. Dad, you're home. Are you okay? Does your arm hurt? Mrs. Harrison said you helped a lady who was in trouble. Cole dropped to one knee, ignoring the pain in his shoulder, and pulled his son into a careful hug. Hey, buddy, I'm okay. Just got a little banged up, but nothing serious. You're a hero, Owen said, his voice muffled against Cole's chest. Mrs. Harrison showed me the news. They said you saved someone's life. I just did what felt right, Owen. That's all. They went inside their small apartment, and Cole sank onto their second-hand couch with a groan of relief. His body ached in places he hadn't known could ache. Owen hovered nearby, clearly wanting to help but unsure what to do, his 8-year-old face serious with concern. "Can I get you something, Dad? Water? Or juice?" "We have juice. Water would be great, buddy." "Thank you." While Owen carefully filled a glass in the kitchen, standing on his step stool to reach the glass-pressed sink, Cole looked around their apartment with new eyes. The furniture that was all salvaged or second-hand, the walls that needed repainting, the carpet worn thin in high-traffic areas. This was what he'd been able to provide for his son despite working himself into exhaustion. This was the best he could do. But Lilia's offer could change that, could give Owen the kind of stability and opportunity that Cole had only dreamed of providing. Owen returned with the water. Some of it sloshed over the side from his careful journey across the room, and Cole drank gratefully. His son settled beside him on the couch, close but careful not to bump his injured shoulder. "Dad, why did you help that lady? Mrs. Harrison said she was a stranger." Cole thought about how to explain it in terms an 8-year-old would understand. "Because she needed help, buddy. And when someone needs help, you help them if you can. That's what good people do, even if it's dangerous. Sometimes, especially when it's dangerous, because that's when people need help the most." Owen processed this, his face scrunched up in concentration. "When I grow up, I want to help people like you do." Cole's throat tightened with emotion. "You can help people right now, Owen. Helping doesn't always mean fighting bad guys. It means being kind, standing up for friends who are being picked on, doing the right thing even when it's hard. Like when Tyler gets picked on at recess and I tell the bullies to stop, exactly like that. You're already a helper, buddy. I'm proud of you." They spent the rest of the afternoon together, Cole resting on the couch while Owen played nearby, occasionally checking to make sure his father was okay. Mrs. Harrison brought over dinner, a casserole that smelled amazing, and probably cost more to make than Cole would have spent feeding them for 3 days. After Owen was in bed that night, Cole sat at their wobbly kitchen table and read through Lilia's job offer again. $90,000, benefits, a single job instead of 2, which meant he could actually be present for Owen instead of constantly exhausted, the chance to do meaningful work instead of just surviving. But doubt gnawed at him. He wasn't qualified for this position. He had no college degree, no management experience, nothing that would make him a logical choice except for one act of courage that had been more desperation than skill. What if he accepted and failed? What if he embarrassed himself, and by extension embarrassed Lilia, who'd put faith in him? What if this was charity dressed up as opportunity, and he was too desperate to see the difference? His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Cole opened it warily, expecting another reporter. Instead, it was from Lilia. "I know you're probably overthinking this. I know you're telling yourself you're not qualified, or that you don't deserve it. I know because I had to fight similar doubts when I took over Quantum Industries at 25. Fresh out of business school with no experience running a company. My father had just died, and everyone expected me to fail. But someone believed in me anyway, gave me the chance to prove myself. I'm offering you the same chance. Not because you saved my life, though I'm grateful for that, but because in 30 seconds of chaos, you showed more courage and character than most people demonstrate in a lifetime. That's what I'm betting on, Cole. Not your resume. You. Think about it. No pressure. But know that I believe in you even if you don't believe in yourself yet." Cole stared at the message for a long time. He thought about Owen sleeping in the next room, about the bike his son wanted, and the school field trips Cole had to decline because of the cost. He thought about working himself to death like his father had, dying young from stress and exhaustion, leaving Owen alone in the world. He thought about Lilia Chambers' face in that parking garage, terrified and desperate, and the choice he'd made to help her. How that choice had felt impossible but also inevitable, like there was no other option his conscience would allow. Maybe accepting this job offer was the same kind of choice. Scary, uncertain, possibly foolish. but the only one his conscience would allow, because turning it down meant consigning Owen to more years of just barely getting by. More years of his father being too tired to play. More years of maybe someday instead of yes. Cole picked up his phone and typed a response before he could overthink it further. Miss Chambers, Lilia. I accept your offer. I'm terrified and uncertain and convinced I'm going to mess this up, but I accept. Thank you for believing in me. I'll do everything I can to prove you right. When do I start? The response came almost immediately. Monday morning, 9 a.m. Quantum Industries headquarters, 40th floor. Welcome to the team, Cole. You're going to change a lot of lives, starting with your own. Cole set the phone down and let his head fall into his hands, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he'd just agreed to. His life was about to change in ways he couldn't predict. Everything familiar, everything safe, was about to be upended. And somehow, despite the fear and uncertainty, Cole felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Real, tangible hope that things could actually get better, that his sacrifices could lead somewhere beyond just survival, that Owen could have the future he deserved. On Monday morning, Cole Palmer would walk into a world he didn't understand, taking on responsibilities he wasn't trained for, betting everything on the belief that courage and character mattered more than credentials. It was terrifying. It was impossible. It was exactly what he needed to do. Monday morning arrived with the kind of nervous energy that made Cole's hands shake as he knotted his tie for the third time. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror in his apartment, wearing the only suit he owned, purchased 5 years ago for a job interview that had gone nowhere. The jacket was slightly too big, the pants needed hemming, and the whole ensemble screamed discount store clearance rack. Owen appeared in the doorway, already dressed in his school uniform, his backpack slung over one shoulder. You look fancy, Dad. Like a businessman on TV. Cole managed to smile, despite the anxiety churning in his stomach. Thanks, buddy. You ready for school? They walked the 3 blocks together, Cole acutely aware of the time, terrified of being late on his first day. He dropped Owen at the Brookside Elementary entrance, hugging him goodbye and promising to pick him up himself this afternoon for the first time in months. No more relying on Mrs. Harrison for every detail of childcare. This new job meant regular hours. Meant being present. The bus ride to downtown Ashford took 40 minutes, and Cole spent every second of it second-guessing his decision. He didn't belong in the corporate world. He was going to embarrass himself, disappoint Lilia, prove that courage in a parking garage didn't translate to competence in an office. Quantum Industries headquarters was a sleek glass tower in the heart of the financial district, 30 stories of steel and ambition that made Cole feel impossibly small as he approached. The lobby was all marble and modern art, with security turnstiles and a reception desk staffed by professionally dressed people who looked like they'd never worked a day of manual labor in their lives. Cole approached the desk, his ID badge from Sterling Heights Tower still in his wallet, because he hadn't thought to bring anything else. Hi, I'm Cole Palmer. I'm supposed to start today in the Community Safety Division. The receptionist's face lit up with recognition. Mr. Palmer, of course. Miss Chambers told us to expect you. Welcome to Quantum Industries. She handed him a temporary badge and directed him to the executive elevators. 40th floor. Miss Chambers' assistant will meet you there. The elevator was glass, walled, offering a dizzying view of Ashford as it climbed. Cole watched the city fall away below, watched the streets where he'd struggled and survived become tiny and distant, and felt like he was ascending into a different atmosphere entirely. The 40th floor was hushed luxury. Thick carpeting that absorbed sound, original artwork on the walls, floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city. A woman in her 50s with silver hair and sharp eyes stood waiting. Mr. Palmer, I'm Patricia Collins, Miss Chambers' executive assistant. Welcome. Her handshake was firm and professional. Miss Chambers is finishing a conference call, but she asked me to show you to your office and get you oriented. Office. Cole had an office. The reality of it hit him as Patricia led him down a corridor and opened a door to reveal a space that was bigger than his living room. Windows overlooked the city. A desk made of dark wood sat in the center, and bookshelves lined one wall. "This is yours," Patricia said. "Your computer login information is in that envelope on the desk. I'll be by this afternoon to help you set up your accounts and access to our systems. You have a meeting with Miss Chambers at 10, lunch with the department heads at noon, and at 2 you'll meet with the Community Safety Advisory Board." Cole's head spun. "Advisory board? We already have an advisory board?" "Miss Chambers doesn't do anything halfway, Mr. Palmer. When she commits to a project, she moves fast." Patricia's expression softened slightly. "I know this is overwhelming, but you're here because she believes in you. Trust her judgment, even if you don't trust your own yet." After Patricia left, Cole stood in the center of his new office, turning slowly, trying to absorb the reality of his situation. 3 days ago, he'd been mopping floors in a parking garage. Now he had an office with a view, a salary that would change his life, and responsibilities he barely understood. His phone buzzed. A text from Owen, sent from Mrs. Harrison's phone during morning recess. "Good luck on your first day, Dad. You're going to be great. I love you." Cole smiled, the anxiety easing slightly. This was why he was here. Not for himself, but for Owen. To build something better, to create opportunities, to show his son that courage could lead to transformation. The morning passed in a blur of introductions and information overload. Lilia met with him personally, walking him through the community safety initiative's goals and scope, partnerships with local police departments, funding for neighborhood watch programs, training for citizens who wanted to help protect their communities. It was ambitious and meaningful and terrifying in its complexity. "I don't have experience with any of this," Cole admitted during their meeting. "I don't know how to manage budgets or coordinate with police departments or run advisory boards." "You'll learn," Lilia said simply. "Patricia will help you. Our community relations director will help you. I'll help you. You're not alone in this, Cole." The lunch meeting with department heads was more challenging. Cole sat at a conference table with 7 vice presidents and directors, all of them polished and professional, all of them clearly skeptical about the janitor who'd been promoted to running a multi-million-dollar initiative. A man named Trevor Blackwood, VP of Operations, was particularly pointed. "Mr. Palmer, can you walk us through your background in nonprofit management?" "I don't have one," Cole said honestly. "I have a background in showing up and doing what needs to be done, in looking out for people who need looking out for. Miss Chambers seems to think that's what this program needs." "With all due respect," said a woman named Jennifer Hayes, Director of Community Relations, "running a corporate initiative requires more than good intentions. It requires strategy, budgeting, stakeholder management. All of which he'll learn." Lilia interrupted smoothly. She'd joined them halfway through the meal, taking her seat at the head of the table with casual authority. "Cole understands the communities we're trying to serve because he's lived in them. He understands the stakes because he's risked everything to protect a stranger. That's not something you can teach in business school." The table fell silent. Cole could feel eyes on him, measuring, judging, waiting to see if he'd crack under scrutiny. "I know I have a lot to learn," Cole said, looking around the table. "And I'm not going to pretend I know everything about running a corporate program or managing budgets. But I do know what it's like to work 2 jobs and still worry about keeping the lights on. I know what it's like to live in neighborhoods where people are scared to let their sons play outside. I know what it's like to see someone in trouble and have to decide if you're the kind of person who helps or the kind who looks away." He paused, gathering courage. "Miss Chambers is betting that my experience is valuable. I'm going to prove her right, but I can't do it alone. I need help from people who know this world, so I'm not asking you to believe in me yet. I'm just asking for the chance to earn it." The silence that followed felt different. Less hostile, more considering. Jennifer Hayes was the first to speak. "Community relations will support you however we can. If you need demographic data or partnership contacts, I can provide that. One by one, the others offered their support, some enthusiastically, some grudgingly, but all of them making the commitment. By the time lunch ended, Cole felt like he'd survived a gauntlet, but hadn't completely embarrassed himself. The afternoon advisory board meeting was less contentious but more overwhelming. Community leaders, retired police officers, non-profit directors, all of them with strong opinions about what needed to be done. Cole mostly listened, taking notes, asking questions, trying to absorb the complexity of the work ahead. By 6 p.m., when Cole finally left Quantum Industries headquarters, his brain felt like mush. He picked up Owen from after-school care, a program he could now actually afford, and they took the bus home together. "How was your first day?" Owen asked, his hand warm in Cole's. "Scary, and exciting, and overwhelming," Cole said honestly. "But good. I think it was good." That night, after Owen was asleep, Cole sat at their kitchen table with a stack of folders Patricia had given him. Grant applications to review, budget proposals to understand, community programs to evaluate. The learning curve was steep, maybe impossible. But as he opened the first folder and started reading about a neighborhood watch program that needed funding, Cole felt something click into place. This was about helping people, about creating safety and community, about taking what he'd done in that parking garage and scaling it up, empowering others to be brave and protective of their neighborhoods. He could do this. He had to do this. Not just for Owen, but for every family struggling in neighborhoods that needed support. For every person who wanted to help but lacked resources. Cole's phone buzzed with a text from Lilia. "How are you feeling after day one?" He typed back, terrified but determined. "Thank you for this chance." Her response came quickly. "You're going to be great, Cole. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start changing lives." 3 weeks into his new position, Cole was beginning to find his rhythm when everything went sideways. He was reviewing grant applications in his office. The morning sunlight streaming through the windows, when Patricia appeared in his doorway with an expression that made his stomach drop. "Cole, we have a situation. Detective Shaw is here with 2 FBI agents. They need to speak with you immediately." The federal agents were a man and woman in dark suits, their credentials identifying them as Special Agents Karen Rodriguez and James Mitchell. Detective Shaw stood beside them, his face grim. "Mr. Palmer," Agent Rodriguez began without preamble, "we've received credible intelligence that you and your son may be in danger. The kidnapping attempt on Miss Chambers was orchestrated by a man named Gregory Ashford, CEO of a competing tech firm. The 3 men we arrested were hired contractors, but Ashford himself remains at large." Cole felt ice water flood his veins. "What does this have to do with me?" "You're a witness," Agent Mitchell said. "You can identify the kidnappers, testify in court. Ashford sees you as a liability. We intercepted communications suggesting he's considering eliminating that liability." "Eliminating?" Cole's voice came out strangled. "You mean killing me?" "We don't know his exact intentions, but we're taking the threat seriously. We recommend protective custody for you and your son until we apprehend Ashford." Cole's mind raced to Owen, currently sitting in class at Brookside Elementary, completely unaware that his father's decision to help a stranger 3 weeks ago had put them both in danger. Lilia burst into the office moments later, her face pale. "Cole, I just heard. This is unacceptable. Gregory Ashford is targeting you because of me." "Miss Chambers," Agent Rodriguez said, "we're arranging protection for you as well. Ashford may try again." "I have private security," Lilia said dismissively. "But Cole and his son need immediate protection. Whatever resources that requires, Quantum Industries will provide." The next few hours passed in a chaotic blur. Cole was driven to Brookside Elementary by federal agents to collect Owen early from school. His son's confusion turned to fear when he saw armed agents, and Cole had to explain in the gentlest terms possible that they needed to go somewhere safe for a little while. "Are the bad guys coming after us?" Owen asked, his 8-year-old face too serious, too scared. I won't let anything happen to you, Cole promised, pulling his son close. I promise, buddy, you're safe. They were taken to a secure location outside Ashford city limits. A nondescript house in a gated community, with armed security patrolling the perimeter. It looked like a regular home from the outside, but had reinforced doors, bulletproof windows, and enough surveillance equipment to monitor a small army. Mrs. Harrison was brought in to help care for Owen, the elderly woman handling the situation with remarkable calm. Lilia visited that evening, her own security detail in tow, her face tight with guilt. This is my fault, she said once Owen was occupied with Mrs. Harrison in another room. You're in danger because you saved me. I made the choice to help, Cole said. Nobody forced me. But you shouldn't have to pay this price. You shouldn't have to hide with your son, because Gregory Ashford is a vindictive criminal. She pulled out her tablet and showed Cole security footage that made his blood run cold. A man had been photographed outside Brookside Elementary 2 days ago, watching the school, taking pictures of the students. Another photo showed the same man outside Cole's apartment building. They've been surveilling you, Lilia said. Planning something. The FBI intercepted communications just in time. Cole looked toward the room where Owen was playing with Mrs. Harrison, his son's laughter filtering through the walls. The sound that had always brought him joy now filled him with dread. What had he done? What had his moment of courage cost his son? The days in protective custody blurred together. Cole tried to maintain some normalcy for Owen, helping with homework, playing games, watching movies. But the armed guards outside, the restrictions on leaving, the constant awareness of danger, all of it took a toll. Owen had nightmares. He woke up crying, asking if the bad guys were coming, if his dad was going to get hurt again. Cole held him through the terror, whispering reassurances he wasn't sure he believed, promising safety he couldn't guarantee. Lilia visited daily, bringing Owen toys and books, bringing Cole updates on the manhunt for Gregory Ashford. The FBI had traced him to several locations, always arriving just hours too late. He had resources, connections, and the kind of desperate ruthlessness that came from knowing capture meant life in prison. On the 5th night in protective custody, Cole sat on the porch of the safe house while Owen slept inside, Mrs. Harrison watching over him. The night was quiet except for cicadas and the distant sound of traffic. Cole's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. His hands shook as he opened it. Your son is 8 years old, Brookside Elementary, 3rd grade, Mrs. Patterson's class. He likes science and soccer. You should have minded your own business, Palmer. Walk away from testifying, or I'll make sure Owen grows up without a father. You have 24 hours to decide. The message included a photo taken that morning, showing Owen through the safe house window, playing in the living room, completely unaware he was being watched. They'd found them. Despite federal protection, despite security measures, Gregory Ashford's people had located the safe house and were watching Owen. Cole's vision blurred with rage and terror. He forwarded the message to Agent Rodriguez, then walked inside to where Lilia was reviewing documents in the kitchen. They found us, he said, his voice hollow. They're threatening Owen. Lilia's face went white. She looked at the message, then immediately called her head of security. Within minutes, the safe house was flooded with additional personnel. Perimeter security tripled, plans made to move them to a different location. But Cole knew the truth. As long as Gregory Ashford was free, as long as Cole was a witness who could testify, his son would never be truly safe. The threat would always exist, lurking in the background, poisoning any chance at normal life. I should walk away, Cole said quietly. Refuse to testify. It's not worth Owen's safety. No. Lilia's voice was fierce. That's exactly what Ashford wants. For you to be too scared to stand up, to let evil win because it's safer than fighting. Easy for you to say. It's not your son at risk. The words came out harsher than Cole intended, but Lilia didn't flinch. You're right. It's not my son, but it's my responsibility. You're in danger because you saved me. So we end this. Not by giving in, but but by making sure Ashford can never threaten anyone again. She pulled out her phone and made a call. "Yes, it's me. I need everything you have on Gregory Ashford. Properties, associates, financial records, everything. And I need it within the hour. Money is no object." The break in the case came from an unexpected source. One of Gregory Ashford's former employees, a man named Daniel Warren who'd been fired 6 months earlier, contacted the FBI with information in exchange for immunity on unrelated charges. He knew where Ashford was hiding, a remote property in the mountains 2 hours north of Ashford, purchased under a shell corporation. Agent Rodriguez coordinated with local law enforcement and federal tactical teams. The raid was planned for dawn, overwhelming force designed to capture Ashford before he could escape or harm anyone. Cole wasn't allowed anywhere near the operation, but he watched the news coverage from the safe house, Owen asleep against his shoulder, both of them exhausted from sleepless nights. When the report came through that Gregory Ashford had been taken into custody without incident, Cole felt something break inside him, tension he'd been carrying for weeks finally releasing. It was over. Owen was safe. Lilia arrived an hour later with champagne and genuine relief on her face. They got him. They got all of them. Ashford's entire network is being rolled up. The FBI says the threat is neutralized. Cole just held Owen tighter, tears streaming down his face, overwhelmed by the enormity of what they'd survived. The return to normal life was gradual. They moved back to their apartment in Brookside, though Quantum Industries provided upgraded security for the building. Cole returned to work, throwing himself into the community safety initiative with renewed purpose. If his experience had taught him anything, it was that safety mattered, that protection mattered, that people needed resources and support to defend their communities. The program flourished under his leadership. Cole approved grants for neighborhood watch programs, funded safety training, partnered with police departments to improve community relations. He brought authenticity that no business degree could provide, understanding the needs of struggling communities because he'd lived in them. 6 months after the kidnapping attempt, Quantum Industries held a gala celebrating the Community Safety Initiative's success. Crime was down in every neighborhood where they'd implemented programs. Community trust in law enforcement was up. People felt safer, more empowered to protect their own streets. Cole stood at the podium in a rented tux, looking out at hundreds of donors and community leaders, and felt the full weight of how far he'd come, from janitor to director, from invisible to celebrated, from barely surviving to actually thriving. 6 months ago, he began. I was mopping floors in a parking garage. I wasn't anyone important. I was just a single dad, trying to keep his son fed and clothed, working myself to exhaustion, invisible to everyone around me. He paused, finding Lilia in the crowd. She smiled at him, encouraging. Then I saw someone in trouble, and I made a choice. A scary choice. A dangerous choice. A choice that changed everything. And what I learned is that we all have that power. Every single one of us can choose courage over comfort, action over apathy, helping over hiding. The audience was silent, focused on his words. This initiative isn't about me being a hero. It's about recognizing that every community has people who want to help, who want to protect, who just need resources and support to make it happen. We're not creating heroes. We're empowering the heroes who already exist on every block, in every neighborhood. His eyes found Owen in the front row, sitting with Mrs. Harrison, looking at his father with pure pride. My son is here tonight. I brought him because I want him to see that doing the right thing matters. That helping people, even when it's hard, even when it costs you something, is always worth it. That's the legacy I want to leave him. Not money or status, but the knowledge that one person can make a difference. The applause was thunderous. Cole stepped back from the podium, feeling lighter somehow, like he'd finally accepted what he'd become. Later, as the gala wound down, Lilia found him on the venue balcony, looking out at the Ashford skyline. You did beautifully, she said, standing beside him. That speech was perfect. I just spoke the truth, Cole said, about what matters. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Lilia spoke again. Can I tell you something? That night when you ran to help me, when you put yourself between me and the kidnappers, you didn't just save my life. You reminded me why I built this company, why any of it matters. I'd forgotten that wealth and power mean nothing if you're not using them to actually help people. We helped each other, Cole said simply. You gave me a chance when nobody else would have. You believed in me before I believed in myself. I saw what was there all along. You just needed someone to point it out. The city spread before them, lights twinkling in the darkness, millions of lives intersecting in countless invisible ways. Somewhere down there, families were struggling the way Cole had struggled. Somewhere, people were making choices between courage and safety, between helping and hiding. And now, because of the program Cole was building, because of Lilia's resources and support, some of those people would have the tools and training to choose courage. One act of bravery, in a parking garage, had rippled outward, creating waves of change that would touch thousands of lives. Cole pulled out his phone and texted Owen, who was heading home with Mrs. Harrison. Love you, buddy. See you in the morning. The response came quickly. Love you too, Dad. You were amazing tonight. I'm proud of you. Standing on that balcony with Lilia beside him and the city stretching out below, Cole Palmer felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Complete peace, not the absence of problems, but the deep security of knowing he'd built something real and lasting from one moment of courage. He'd run toward danger not knowing what it would cost or what it would bring, and somehow it had brought him everything that mattered. 2 years after that November night, when everything changed, Cole Palmer stood in the parking garage of Sterling Heights Tower, his son Owen beside him. The fluorescent lights still buzzed overhead. The concrete still held that distinctive smell of motor oil and dust, but everything else was different. Cole wore a tailored suit now, custom-fitted rather than second-hand, though he'd never quite gotten comfortable with the luxury. His shoulder had healed completely, leaving only a thin scar he sometimes traced absently when lost in thought. But the real changes went deeper than clothing or scars. Is this where it happened, Dad? Owen asked. At 10 years old, he was taller now, his voice beginning to lose that little boy quality that had once defined it. Where you saved Miss Chambers. Right over there, Cole said, pointing to a section of the garage near the entrance ramp. That's where the van was parked. That's where I used the spray bottle, and everything went crazy. They walked to the spot together, and Cole remembered with crystal clarity how terrified he'd been, how certain he was going to die, how the only thing that kept him moving was the knowledge that someone needed help, and he was the only one there to provide it. Were you scared? Owen asked. Absolutely terrified, Cole admitted. But sometimes being brave means doing the right thing even when you're scared. Especially when you're scared. The Community Safety Initiative had grown beyond anything Cole had imagined. They'd expanded to 12 cities across 3 states, trained over 5,000 volunteers, funded hundreds of programs. Crime was down, community engagement was up, and countless neighborhoods had been transformed by residents who'd been given the resources and support to protect their own streets. Cole had proven the skeptics wrong. He'd learned budget management and stakeholder coordination and all the corporate skills he'd lacked. But more importantly, he'd brought authenticity and genuine understanding to work that could have easily become just another corporate checkbox initiative. Every decision he made, every program he approved, was filtered through the lens of someone who'd actually lived the struggles these communities faced. Lilia appeared at the garage entrance, her heels clicking against concrete as she approached. She wore a crimson dress that reminded Cole of the coat she'd worn that night. Though this time there was no terror in her eyes, only warmth and something deeper that had grown between them over 2 years of working together, surviving danger together, building something meaningful together. I thought I'd find you both here, she said, reaching them and taking Cole's hand naturally. The gesture was automatic now, comfortable, the kind of easy intimacy that came from genuine connection rather than dramatic circumstances. Their relationship had developed slowly, carefully, always prioritizing Owen's well-being and the foundation's work. Dinner meetings that stretched late into the evening, conversations that moved from professional to personal, a growing awareness that what they'd built together went beyond gratitude or business partnership. 6 months ago, Lilia had asked Cole and Owen to move into her estate, not as employees, but as family. The transition had been surprisingly smooth, Owen adapting to the larger space while maintaining his groundedness, attending the same public school, keeping the same friends, never letting wealth change who he was at his core. "Are you ready?" Lilia asked, squeezing Cole's hand. Today was special. They were here for a ceremony, the dedication of a memorial plaque in the Sterling Heights parking garage, commemorating not just what had happened here, but what it had inspired. The mayor would speak, community leaders would gather, and the spot where Cole had faced armed kidnappers would become a permanent reminder that ordinary people could create extraordinary change. The ceremony began at noon, with maybe 50 people gathered in a parking garage that had once been the site of violence and terror. The mayor spoke about courage and community. Detective Shaw, now retired, shared details of the investigation that had brought down Gregory Ashford's entire criminal network. Community members whose neighborhoods had been transformed by the safety initiative spoke about reduced crime and increased hope. Then it was Cole's turn to speak. He stood before the small crowd, Owen and Lilia beside him, and looked at the memorial plaque being unveiled. It was simple but powerful, bronze letters on polished granite. On this spot, Cole Palmer chose courage over safety, action over apathy, and reminded us all that one person can make a difference. The 14th of November, 2023. 2 years ago, Cole began. I was just trying to finish my shift. I was a janitor, mopping floors, invisible to everyone, just trying to survive long enough to get home to my son. I wasn't looking to be a hero. I wasn't looking to change my life. I just saw someone who needed help. He paused, gathering his thoughts. What I learned that night, and in everything that followed, is that we all have moments where we have to choose. Choose between doing what's easy and doing what's right. Between protecting ourselves and protecting others. Between looking away and stepping up. His eyes found Owen, who was watching with that same pride that never failed to make Cole's chest tight with emotion. My son asked me earlier if I was scared that night, and the answer is yes. I was terrified, but I was more scared of the person I'd become if I walked away, more scared of teaching my son that safety mattered more than helping someone in desperate need. Cole looked at Lilia, seeing the tears on her face, the love in her eyes. What happened after that night changed everything. I found work that matters, found purpose I didn't know I was looking for, found people who believed in me before I believed in myself. But more than that, I learned that transformation is possible. That one choice, one moment of courage, can unlock a future you never dared to imagine. The crowd was silent, hanging on his words. This plaque isn't really about me. It's about all of us. Every person here who's chosen to make their community safer. Every volunteer who's been trained through our program. Every neighbor who's decided to look out for the people around them. You're all part of this story. You're all proof that ordinary people create extraordinary change. After the ceremony, as people mingled and took photos with the memorial, Lilia pulled Cole aside to a quiet corner of the garage. Her expression was nervous in a way he rarely saw, vulnerability showing through her usual confidence. "Cole, there's something I want to ask you," she said. "These past 2 years, working with you, building this program, watching you be an amazing father to Owen and an incredible partner to me, I've realized something." She pulled a small box from her purse and opened it, revealing a simple gold band. "I don't want to wait anymore. I don't want to be careful or strategic or worried about propriety. I want to build a life with you and Owen, officially and permanently. Cole Palmer, will you marry me?" Cole felt tears spring to his eyes. This woman, this brilliant, powerful, extraordinary woman who could have anyone, was choosing him. The janitor who'd become something more, but who at his core was still just a man trying to do right by the people he loved. "Yes," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Absolutely. Yes." They kissed there in the parking garage, where everything had begun. And when they pulled apart, they found Owen watching with a grin. "Does this mean Lilia is going to be my stepmom?" he asked. "If that's okay with you," Lilia said, kneeling to his level. Owen threw his arms around her neck. "That's awesome. Can I be in the wedding?" 6 months later, they married in a small ceremony at the community center in Brookside, the neighborhood where Cole had struggled and survived. Not at some fancy venue, but in the place that represented the communities their work served. Owen stood as best man, Mrs. Harrison cried happy tears in the front row, and community members who'd been transformed by the safety initiative celebrated alongside corporate executives and city officials. It was a merging of two worlds that should never have intersected, brought together by one moment of courage in a parking garage. As Cole and Lilia danced at their reception, he thought about the journey that had brought them here. From invisible janitor to respected director. From barely surviving to actually thriving. From alone to surrounded by family and community. "Thank you," he whispered to Lilia, "for seeing something in me I didn't see in myself. Thank you for running toward danger instead of away from it," she whispered back. "For being brave enough to help a stranger. For changing my life and reminding me what really matters." Years would pass, and the community safety initiative would continue to grow, touching thousands more lives, creating ripples of positive change that spread far beyond anything Cole had imagined. Owen would grow up secure and grounded, eventually following in his father's footsteps by dedicating his life to helping others. And Cole and Lilia would build a partnership that proved love could grow from the most unexpected circumstances. But it all started in a parking garage on a November night when a janitor whispered one word and chose courage over safety. When an ordinary man did an extraordinary thing and discovered that sometimes the most unlikely people create the most profound change. Cole Palmer had been invisible his entire life, until the moment he decided someone else's life mattered more than his own safety. And in that moment, he became unforgettable, not because of what he gained, but because of what he was willing to risk. That was the real lesson, the one that would inspire countless others in the years to come. Courage wasn't about being fearless, it was about being terrified and acting anyway. It was about choosing to help even when the cost was high. It was about believing that one person, one moment, one choice could change everything. And Cole Palmer was living proof that it could. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the markwelf.com notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.